Good morning. Those of you that are here in the room or joining us from your homes or perhaps even cars, I know that's possible. But good morning. We welcome Steve Jensen on the organ and returning many of our choir members to help lead us in music today. So we're very grateful for that. A few notes. The nominating committee, there's a page in your order of worship that will give you more information, including the numbers for the leadership team for that. But please consider if there is a board that you would like to participate on or one that you'd just like to hear more about in order to make a decision to contact one of those board or committee members. Then a reminder, believe it or not, Ash Wednesday is coming very soon. So that will be the first Wednesday in March, and the service will be at 7 p.m. as usual. There is an invitation for you to offer a brief word or a phrase that we might reflect on Ash Wednesday, but even ongoing through Lent, that pertains to a need for healing or restoration. There will be cards available that evening, or you may email that word or phrase to me ahead of time. Please know these are not things that will be noted by name of person, but more the intent of a desire for some prayer. And as you know, we do that ongoing collection for Just One More Ministry in the bin outside. But I want to make a note that the middle school youth will be serving there next Saturday. Quite a few of the kids that participate are able to come. So that'll be a wonderful time for them to immerse themselves and learn more about that ministry firsthand. We also look forward to coffee and some special sweets and some time for conversation to gather after worship and to take a look at the ongoing work going on in Friendship Lounge. So after worship, join us and enjoy some conversation and some coffee and just see how it becomes more and more inviting to be there. A quick note, this is not in your order of worship, but both the Tuesday book groups and the Thursday Bible study are doing a couple of special Lent series. So if you want to hear more about that, take a look at the newsletter on what those might be. If there's something that you'd like to join in for just that season, take a look at that. You can email me or give me a call if you need any more information about those things as well. And now I'd like to call up Ginny Cannonberg for some special information about our benevolence board.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What a treat to be here in this beautiful sanctuary this morning with the sun shining and just very special time. I'm thankful to have the opportunity to share some information with you about our upcoming Easter special offering and our Lenten weeks of giving. The Benevolence Board has again chosen Repairers of the Breach as the beneficiary of our Easter giving. The pandemic has had a devastating impact on the homeless and all the organizations that serve them. Repairers has successfully managed this unprecedented situation for the past 2 years and continues to consistently provide this compromised population with a meal and a path to a better life. In 1995, Repairers changed its focus from advocating for the homeless to becoming Milwaukee's very first daytime homeless resource center. Today is the area's only daytime refuge and resource for both men and women that is open 6 days a week. Repairers partners with multiple other nonprofits to make sure that they can provide the services needed by their clients. They help with such things as drug and alcohol counseling, food and nutrition guidance, permanent housing, job training, health care, domestic violence, you name it, they can find somebody to help those in need. Our church community has a long-standing relationship with Repairers, and we know firsthand that the support we give will be used wisely and gotten to the right place. Along with our annual Easter special offering request, we're also want you to consider helping collect much needed supplies for them. and personal hygiene and cleaning and all the things that they need to keep their doors open every day. Those special givings weeks will start on March 2nd. Each week we'll be highlighting a different specific requested and required item for them. This will include cleaning supplies, toiletries, men and women's clothing, and first aid products, all of which can be easily dropped off under the portico. Please give prayerful consideration to how you and your family can support this important work in the weeks ahead. Thank you very much.
Let's stand together as you are able for the responsive call to worship. Happy are those who delight in the Lord, who live in his ways both day and night.
They are like trees planted by streams of water. In all that they do, they prosper.
The Lord watches over those who walk in his paths.
Thanks be to God.
Let's sing together from all that dwell below the skies. Let's be in prayer together. Lord, we reach out to you in all the things that make up our here and now. Inspire us in our worship today, in your word and spirit, given in our response, that we might follow you. Receive this prayer as we offer it together, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. And now we invite the children going to music and movement and godly fun, as they are already racing to do so. Our first reading is drawn from Luke's Gospel, chapter 19. And it is the story of Jesus meeting a man named Zacchaeus and their conversation. Listen. He, Jesus, entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost. Amen.
Center of my life,
So I'm going to come around to our reading from 1 Corinthians in a couple minutes, but I want to take some time to do some stage setting before we get there. And I want to start with the reading that Julie just shared with us from Luke. That story of Jesus and Zacchaeus, it's always been one of those stories that grabs on to me. Obviously, I have a certain amount of connection to the physical realities that are being depicted in that narrative. Being that short guy in the back of the crowd trying to find some way to see what's going on up there is something I have a little bit of experience with. But I have a much deeper appreciation for the story that doesn't simply come from that picture of the diminutive Zacchaeus up in the tree, but also doesn't really come from Jesus forgiving Zacchaeus or from Zacchaeus' change of heart and for really the conclusion of the story at all, even though all of those are wonderful moments and lessons to bring into our lives. My deepest appreciation for this story actually comes right there in the middle, in that singular moment of Jesus calling Zacchaeus out of the tree. Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, Jesus says, for I must stay at your house today. I'm not sure we often grasp the stunning countercultural and tradition-shattering perspective that was echoed in that one single phrase. There's a reason that the next line in Luke's gospel, as this story is told, tells us about all of those people who were watching, who started grumbling and complaining about the fact that Jesus was about to go to the house of a sinner. Because in short, all of those people were convinced that that was simply something that a person of true faith would never do. Now, before we keep going, I want to take a step back. As many of you know, we've had a couple of memorial services here in the church over the last little more than a week. The first was last Saturday for Sue Hitler, and the second was just this past Friday for John Cause. And as is always the case, our history and our relationships with these families are different from one to the next, and we always strive to make these services a very direct reflection of the person we're remembering and the family and the friends that are gathering in that remembrance. What was noteworthy in these two services, however, was how truly distinct and different these two services were. When planning for Sue's service, leading up to last Saturday, her widower provided me with a list of 10 songs that he had anticipated would be incorporated into the service. Many of those 10 songs ended up being performed by an African-American gospel band that was brought in for the service that included 5 vocalists, drums, keyboard, and all. With 5 eulogies and all of that music, it was a service unlike any I'd ever led before. When planning for John's service this past Friday, on the other hand, it was 3 hymns on organ, 6 speakers plus another at the committal, and all sorts of logistics of how to seat the 47 members of the family who were going to be here in the front, how and where to host the large gathering for the reception afterwards, where the bugler would stand when playing taps, what we would do with the overflow crowds if we had them, and on and on and on. And it was in the context of kind of planning for both of these services at the same time that Rick and I actually here in the sanctuary a little over the week ago, we found ourselves in a conversation about other unique aspects of memorials that we've led and or participated in years past. He recalled one where the individual was a huge University of Michigan fan. The service included the U of M fight song and 5'2" with eyes of blue. I immediately thought of the service we did for Pam Burgum at her church a few months ago, where we closed singing On Wisconsin at the end of the service. And I recalled a service from over 20 years ago now where the family wanted to play at the end of the service Monty Python's Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. It was to close out a service for a man who had died from brain cancer in his 40s. Now, for those of you who may not know the song, there's one line in particular in that song that includes, we'll just say, a word that isn't a church word. But we do it. We find ways to incorporate 10 songs, 5 eulogies, and a gospel band into a service. We manage the logistics to discern the path to create the gathering that the family envisions. We belt out the Michigan fight song even if our alliances are elsewhere. We let that non-church word slide because you know it will bring a smile to the face of a family enduring the throes of grief. We do it all. And we do it because that's where the family is. And whatever it means, that's where we need to meet them, with the love of God. And that's what brings us, I want to suggest, to our reading this morning from Paul's letter to the church in Corinth. As you may recall from past messages that we've shared, a substantial portion of Paul's writings to the early church surround divisions that had emerged in the people, many of which are grounded in the differences in religious and cultural backgrounds and how those expectations and traditions would or would not make their way into the life of the church. Primarily, it was the debate between those of a Jewish origin seeking to have their traditions and rituals incorporated into the life of the church, and those of the Gentile or non-Jewish background who didn't see a need for such things in the way of Christ. And that same background stands behind the words that we encounter today in the 9th and 10th chapters of 1 Corinthians. Paul spends the first portion of the 9th chapter in something of an argument of self-defense, seeking to articulate the pattern in which he's conducted himself as an apostle. And then near the end of the chapter, he continues his argument in this, the end of the 9th chapter, he continues his argument in this way. For though I am free with respect to all, Paul writes, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so that I might win those under the law. To those outside the law I became as one outside the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so that I might win those outside the law. To the weak I became weak, so that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all people, that I might by all means save some. I do it all for the sake of the gospel, so that I may share in its blessings. Now, Paul takes a bit of a detour here after those words as he shifts his attention from this argument to something of a history lesson turned morality play grounded in the Israelites and the wilderness. And then he returns to this theme again later in the 10th chapter, starting in the 23rd verse. All things are lawful, he goes on, but not all things are beneficial. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Do not seek your own advantage, but that of the other. Eat whatever is sold in the meat market without raising any questions on the ground of conscience, for the earth and its fullness are the Lord's. If an unbeliever invites you to a meal and you are disposed to go, eat whatever is set before you without raising any question on the ground of conscience. But if someone says to you, 'This has been offered in sacrifice,' then do not eat it, out of consideration for the one who informed you and for the sake of conscience. I mean, the other's conscience, not your own. For why should my liberty be subject to the judgment of someone else's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why should I be denounced because of that for which I give thanks?" So whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do, do everything for the glory of God. Give no offense to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God, just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, so that they may be saved. As I looked through these passages this week, my mind went back to an oft-used phrase that's one of those proverbial comments that just kind of grinds at me whenever it comes up. Christians are meant to be in this world, people will say, but not of this world. I cringe every time I hear that. It's a comment that's emblematic of the notion that we as Christians are somehow meant to stand apart from this world in which we live, to rise above the trappings and temptations of the world as we set our sights on the more noble and dutiful focuses of faith and spirit. Now, don't get me wrong. Despite our human condition that often leaves us falling short of such goals, I'm all for trying to turn our attention away from the trappings of this world and towards the treasures of God. That comment, however, that notion that Christians are meant to be in this world but not of this world, far too often manifests itself in a goal of separation that is simply contrary to the heart of Jesus. And that's exactly what was so stunning about that moment of Jesus calling Zacchaeus out of the tree. "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down," Jesus says, "for I must stay at your house today." This was the last thing that any man of good faith would do. Or at least they'd have you believe so. There is no question that the mantra of established Judaism at the time of Jesus was that they were to be in this world, but not of this world, at least not of the world that stood outside their world. They were a culture of separation in many ways. From the unclean, from the unworthy, from the unfaithful. They lived out an expectation of keeping themselves holy by staying clear and away and separated from anything that was not. But one of the main points of conflict in the ministry of Jesus was that he came in and simply shattered that expectation. Jesus called Zacchaeus out of that tree. "We're going to your house today." He ate meals with sinners and touched the unclean. He allowed those deemed as unworthy to wash his feet. He welcomed the children and chastised every faithful follower who would try to keep another away from his love. In every moment and stage of his ministry, the last thing Jesus ever did was separate himself from the world. He was in the world, and he was of the world, meeting people where they are, not where anybody thought they should be, because that's how you bring the love of God to others. "For though I am free with respect to all," Paul writes, I have made myself a slave to all, that I might win more of them. To the Jews I became as a Jew, in order to win the Jews. To those under the law I became as one under the law, so that I might win those under the law. He goes on and on. In other words, Paul says here, I'm going to be in this world, and I'm going to be of this world, because that's how you show people the love of God and what it can mean in their lives. Give no offense to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God, Paul goes on in the end of our reading from today. Just as I try to please everyone in everything I do, not seeking my own advantage, but that of many, so that they might be saved. Just as I try to please everyone in everything I do. I'd never really paid attention to that phrase, and I kind of laughed over it this week when I read it, because I think the last phrase I'd ever use to describe Paul is to call him a people pleaser. But that's really what he calls himself here. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, I guess to some extent, he was. He was something of a social chameleon, willing to shift the manifestation of his faith in ways that could allow him to walk alongside those around him, pursuing his mission to help give them a true understanding of the love of God in their lives. Now, I want to be clear here. In some of those sections that surround that which we read this morning, Paul makes clear that he's not suggesting that one ought to compromise the convictions of one's faith. He's not saying that we should become so of this world that we start succumbing to those temptations and trappings that are not of God's Spirit for our lives. But what he is saying is the same thing that Jesus exemplified again and again in his ministry, that we need to be in this world and that we need to be of this world, because that's how we show people the love of God and what it can mean for them. I cannot tell you how often we succumb to that tendency to be in, but not of this world. And how readily, perhaps albeit subconsciously, we tend to want to meet people where we want them to be, and not where they are. We could talk about the age-old debates of how people should dress when they come to church. The decades-long mourning the church has felt over the way that soccer and hockey have stolen our Sunday mornings. The 1,000,001 things that we have to say about how things were back in my day. But here's the cold, hard truth. None of that matters. And no one outside the walls of the church cares. If we want people to know this thing that brings such tremendous joy into our lives, if we want people to experience God's love and joy and peace in the way that we do again and again, if we want people to be uplifted by a community of faith as we are day in and day out, we have to find our ways to meet them where they are. Broken, angered, confused, sorrowful, resistant to organized religion, in prisons and hospitals, on park benches and Starbucks stools. I could spend all day on those things, and in some ways I feel like I already have, but the theory doesn't change. Be it Jesus or Paul, they never missed a beat in being of this world enough to meet people where they were in order to allow them to find a glimpse of what the love of God could mean in their lives. 2,000 years later, the specifics and the contexts may have changed, but the theory remains the same. We must be in this world, and we must be of this world. Meeting people where they are. Because that and that alone is how we truly show people the wonder that is the love of God in their lives. Amen. Our sermon hymn is God of All Love. Let's join in singing together. Please stand. Please be seated. As we gather in prayer this morning, I have a couple things I want to mention. As I noted in the message, and we've discussed the last couple of weeks, we have had those memorial services. There are still some flowers out in the narthex from Friday's service with the Kosses, and we keep both of those families, the Koss and Hitler families, in our prayers. I continue our prayers for Jean Genslin, who continues to send messages through various people now and then who have been to see her and is doing well, but at home and mostly in bed at this point. And so our continued prayers for her and her family, and she watches on and sends her love and appreciates her prayers. And we echo all of that to you. And then the other thing that just struck me this morning as I was sitting here and listening to Ginny speak at the outset of worship this morning, I am grateful and I am deeply thankful for the growing edge that has been our benevolence ministry for a number of years now. We have had just wonderful people and leadership and support from the congregation that continues to grow that arm of our ministry and what it means to the community around us. And I'm grateful for the people and for God's Spirit among and in that who have made that happen. Are there other joys and concerns, prayers that people would like to share this morning? Ginny.
Prayers for the Ukrainians and world chaos to somehow figure itself out.
Ginny highlights the circumstance and the fear and the concern and the confusion and the angst, and the litany of words is endless surrounding the circumstance in Ukraine right now. And prayers for the world leaders who are involved, that perhaps they can find a way to peace and prosperity in that region. Thank you, Ginny, for that reminder. Yeah, Laura.
So as a follow-up to your sermon, I guess my prayer request would be for the guidance and the how to what we need to do.
We talked a little bit about the why. God's Spirit has to take us to the how. And Laura highlights that need and that prayer for all of us in the wake of our reflections this morning. Thank you, Laura. Others? And let's join our hearts in prayer. God, there are needs that surround and pains that overwhelm and hurts that can sometimes seem almost too much to bear. But even in the face of those realities and confronting the sometimes burdensome strife that life can thrust upon us, we sit in this room in the calm of this moment, in the peace of this place, in the light that shines through, and we are reminded of the true joy, the wonder, the magnificence that we know living in your care, holding fast to our trust in your promises in our lives. We're so grateful, God, for your every gift, for your every blessing, for your work in our every moment, known and unknown. For the hope that holds us even in our darkest times. Because we know we are yours, and you are ours. And we long, God, to share that joy, that blessing, that gift with those around us. But we do need your Spirit, your wisdom, your guidance to show us the ways. Open us, God, to new paths. new understandings, new opportunities to meet people where they are, to enter into the pains, to walk alongside the sufferings, to bridge beyond the walls of our comfort, and to breathe your love into the pain that surrounds us. There is such blessing that we know in you, God. There is such joy in sharing that with others. So help us to be open to those ways. Give us the wisdom to see. And then the faith to follow. God, look into our hearts, to our praises and our petitions, to our joys and to our sorrows. And open those hearts to the winds and wonders of your Spirit in this place, in this moment, and in all of those places and moments to come. For we pray it in his name. Amen. As Julie noted at the outset of worship, I want to highlight that fellowship hour is back up and running. There's coffee, there's snacks, so stick around and chat for a little bit after worship. But as we close, let's stand together again and join in singing, Holy God, we praise thy name.